Hey there, welcome to the channel. So as you can see, my hands are full with gluten-free flour blends that you can get at the store. As a matter of fact, all of these come from Walmart. But which one should you choose for baking? Today on the channel, I'm going to show you one recipe using each of these flours, and we're going to see if they all work. I'm Jamie with SavorySaver. I share gluten-free recipes, tips, tricks, and resources to make your gluten-free lifestyle easier. So please consider hitting subscribe, and let's get to baking. Okay everyone, this is how this recipe is going to work. So I have pulled a recipe off of the internet. In fact, it is the Tollhouse original chocolate chip cookie recipe. This recipe, been around forever. You probably are familiar with it. I'm also going to be taking a shortcut for myself just to try to make things easier for me. Since chocolate chip cookies, we measure the wet ingredients and then the dry ingredients get mixed in. I'm going to take the wet ingredients, which would be your sugars and your vanilla and your eggs. I'm going to get that all prepped and then divide it out evenly by 4. The easy way for me to do this is by weight. So while the ingredients are all going to be measured out in volume when I make these, I'm going to sort out a little bit by weight. Then all I have to do is stir in the dry ingredients and the chocolate chips. Most of that will be done off camera because I think you guys know how to make chocolate chip cookies. So the recipe divides into 4. So I'm going to use 4 of the flours, and the one flour that I did show you that I'm not going to be using is the Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1. And the reason for that is on the back of the package is a gluten-free chocolate chip recipe. And if you compare the ingredients on this recipe to the ingredients on this recipe, they're the same ingredients and amounts. So obviously, Bob's Red Mill says that this recipe works. So I'm not going to show you that one. Now, let's get into making these cookies and looking at the finished ones so we can see if you need to decide which one will work for you. So these are the gluten-free flour blends that we're going to be using for these cookies. If you want more information on these blends, check out my other video on gluten-free blend flours available at Walmart. And let's just go over the brands real quickly. I will link below to them in the description if you want to look up more information on them or purchase them. Divided Sunset, Bob's 1-to-1, which I am not making because the recipe on the back of the package is the same as the Tollhouse recipe. Extra White Gold, King Arthur gluten-free Measure to Measure, which is my go-to store brand or store purchase brand right now. And the Great Value brand, which of course is the Walmart brand. So let's get to those videos. Hey y'all, so here's the base of the cookie recipe minus the dry ingredients. I've got 2 sticks of butter, 3/4 cup of granulated sugar, 3/4 cup packed brown sugar, 2 eggs, and a teaspoon of vanilla. I'm gonna mix this all up and then divide it in 4 so I can make the actual cookies. So now everything's been mixed together and I've figured out how much batter I need for each small batch of cookies. So I'm gonna start off with each cookie base. I'm gonna add each gluten-free flour, make it into cookies, and bake it off per the Tollhouse directions, which are 9 to 11 minutes at 375. And when we get back, I'll go over each of the cookies as far as taste and texture. We'll see how they bake up. And since the flours all have slightly different textures, I expect them to be slightly different in the mixing process, but not enough to talk about. So let's get all these batches mixed, baked off, and cooled off so we can taste and see what we like as far as how they baked and the taste and the texture. So after baking, these are the King Arthur Measure for Measure flour cookies. And they've gone 10 minutes. At 9 minutes, they didn't look done. And then at the 10 minute, they almost look overdone. So they're cooling for 2 minutes on the hot sheet, and then I'll transfer them over to a cooling rack. And then I'm gonna mix up my next batch. That'll give this time to cool a little bit more before we add this batter to it. So while everything looks almost overcooked, we'll see how they are once they're cool. But you can see they did spread quite a bit. And I'm just using a 1.5 tablespoons cookie scoop for each one. So these are the cookies from Divided Sunset. They do look a little flatter than the King Arthur just visually, but we'll see when we do side-by-sides of them. I also feel like they cooked just a little more than the King Arthur. These were in just at 10 minutes. So the next 2 batches of cookies I'm gonna do at 9 minutes, as long as they look cooked through, because I don't like my cookies quite this dark in general. Now, let's move on to the next ones. So this is our 3rd batch of cookies. This is using the extra white gold gluten-free flour blend. They just came out of the oven. They gotta sit for 2 minutes before I move them. But these so far have spread the most out of all the flours so far. Not sure if it's the ingredients or if it's just that my dough is warming up. There's a number of factors that, along with the flours being gluten-free, we still have factors that even gluten baking has, such as temperature of the kitchen, temperature of the dough, things like that that we can't totally control. So I'm gonna let these cool for another minute, move them over to cool completely, and then I'm going to make the last batch, which is the Wal-Mart brand Great Value Gluten-Free Flour Blend. So here are the baked Great Value flour mix cookies. And as you can see, they stayed round and they've puffed up. Now, part of that could be because it got so warm in here, since I'm baking 4 batches separately, that I decided to chill the dough for about 10 minutes. So in between batches, this last bit of dough or batter actually chilled. And then when I added the flour and the chocolate chips, that's the only chance it had to warm back up. So it wasn't totally cold, but it was definitely cooler. So that could be why these have baked differently. And if you use any of these flours, you may have to adjust temperatures of the dough and bake time and all of that anyway. So I'm not gonna let this hurt my feelings, because actually, to me, this is the best looking batch, and it's with the Great Value flour. So we're gonna let everything cool, and then we'll give everything a taste. So here are the cookies, all baked off, ready to try. And we're just gonna go down the row and we'll talk briefly about each one, and then I'll give each one a try. So the King Arthur were the first ones we baked, so that's when the dough or batter was its coolest, probably. So they're nice and golden on the bottom. The chocolate chips stayed where they needed to be mostly. And they did flatten out a little more than I like, and these baked for the 10 to 11 minutes. As far as working with the batter, it was fine. In fact, working with all 4 batters, I didn't really notice any difference. I did notice that the King Arthur was the grittiest, and the other 3 were not quite as gritty. It was probably from most gritty to least, it was probably King Arthur as a batter, then Great Value, and then these 2 were very, very smooth compared to the other 2. The second one we baked was with the Divided Suns brand. They're very similar to the King Arthur brand as far as the way everything stayed, the way everything baked off. Remember, as I'm doing these, the oven is staying at 375 and my kitchen is heating up. So this may be what affected the next batch. These are flat. They're all flat. They're gonna be super crunchy, which not my favorite kind of cookie. The chocolate chips stayed where they were, but they spread and they're just not my favorite. Haven't tasted them yet. They may be fine, but I like chewier cookies. So as far as the texture thing, they're not gonna be a winner for me. One thing that may have helped is we could have chilled the dough down for 10 minutes or so, then made it into cookies and baked it off. That may have helped. Both of these cookies were baked for 9 minutes. Finally, our great value ones, shape-wise, they're my favorite. They puffed up, they're crinkled on the top a little bit, they didn't spread. Could have been because I chilled the dough in between this batch and this batch. That could be part of the reason. The other thing about the great value is I actually baked them a minute longer and they're still lighter than the other cookies, but they're nice and golden on the bottom. So in just looking at these cookies without even trying them, I would go for the great value myself. So let's give each one of these a taste and see how that goes. Okay, so now for the taste test. 4 cookies, I'm gonna take about half of each, give it a try, we'll see what I think. I'm gonna break them so you guys can see, so we can see if they're crunchy or chewy or somewhere in the middle. And then we'll give Tara the other halves when she gets home. So that's gonna have some chew to it. I like that because, again, I like a chewy cookie. Let's actually try the cookie and not the chocolate chip that I was worried was gonna fall on the floor. Taste and texture, I really like the taste. It's very, very similar to a regular cookie with gluten. I can't really tell it's gluten-free, so no weird aftertaste to me. I also like the texture of this one because it's chewy and crunchy at the same time, so it's gonna satisfy my want for a chewy cookie. Good cookie. King Arthur Measure for Measure Gluten Free Flour. Right now, that's why it's one of my favorites, because it works. Let's try the next one. This is Divided Sunset. So texture-wise, it broke about the same as the King Arthur one. Very good taste. Edges are a little crispy, inside's a little chewy, and I actually think I like the texture slightly better than the King Arthur. I feel that it has a little less grittiness to it than the King Arthur. Good cookie, good option to try is the Divided Sunset brand. Now let's try the Extra White Gold. Price-wise, I think this was actually the most expensive flour. It also had a couple ingredients like pea protein that the others do not have. And for each flour that I've used today, be sure to watch the video where I talk about the gluten-free flour blends you can get at Walmart. So, okay, it's not as crunchy as it appeared to be when it came out of the oven, but they are thin and I do not like that. Taste-wise, it's good, but I did get a bunch of chocolate chips, so let's try the edge that has less chocolate. Taste is good. Texture is not my favorite, and I mean that by they're thin and more crisp than the other ones. As far as the pieces that are a little thicker, the texture is good. Don't know if I would buy that over the Divided Sunset or the King Arthur brand, but not a bad flour at all. Okay, we're down to the final cookie. Great value. Definitely the thickest, the lightest. It cooked for 10 minutes. This is the one I'm most excited about. Let's see how it tastes. It's kind of puffy. Let's see if it's cookie-like or cake-like. So, honestly, taste-wise, it's very good. Texture-wise, it's good texture-wise, but it's actually a little too puffy for me. So, I would like it to have baked up a little less puffy. Taste-wise, I have no issues with it. Tastes like a regular cookie. A little crisp on the outside, chewy on the inside, good cookie. So as a final thing for these gluten-free flour blends that measure cup for cup like regular flour, they're all good options for this recipe. Now, as far as ingredients, they are all slightly different, so you always want to read all the ingredients in those gluten-free flours and read the bag every time because they can be subject to change. Bob's Red Mill is behind me, which you can't really see, Again, that recipe on the back of the bag is exactly the same as the Tollhouse recipe. So I assume that recipe works. So if you like Bob's Red Mill 1-to-1, pick up a bag of that. In any case, these flours are all available at Walmart. At the time of this filming, I will link below to them either in Walmart or in Amazon, so hopefully you can find them yourself if you want to try any of them. To learn more about these flours, be sure to watch my video about gluten-free flour blends that you can find at Walmart. I want to thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you on the next video.